Because we have looked in the Gospel of John twice. We've been in Matthew. This morning, we're in Mark. Next week, probably we'll be in Luke, unless something happens along this week that changes that. But so far, everything that we've seen during this series are Jesus' actual words to his disciples. Remember, what we're doing during this time between Easter and Pentecost is going back and looking at those times when Jesus appeared to his disciples, or when there was a message delivered to his disciples. In that 40-day time period when Jesus appeared and when he reminded them, when he encouraged them, when he strengthened them, when he challenged the disciples during that time, there was that constant kind of thing of Jesus coming in, of Jesus meeting with his disciples, of there being his actual words to his disciples. That's different in our passage today. We have something a little bit odd when we look in Mark's gospel when it comes to Jesus' appearance. There's a good reason for it. I want to talk to you a little bit before we get to the passage this morning of why that's the case, why Mark's gospel has a little bit different kind of ending than some of the other gospels do. Mark's gospel is considered to be the first gospel that was written down. Think about that. This was a brand new form of literature. This was a gospel. This was a writing of proclamation, a proclamation of good news. And as such, it was completely different from anything that had come before. And it was copied then, many scholars believe, by Matthew and Luke. At least they had a copy of Mark in front of them, most scholars believe, when they were writing their own Gospels, and included a few things as the Lord led them in their telling of the story of what was going on. But Mark's Gospel not only was groundbreaking in how it was written, and that it was a brand new form of literature, but it was also groundbreaking in that it was literature that was addressed to a particular group of people. This wasn't just like one of Paul's letters. Now, Paul's letters were written prior to Mark's gospel being written down, I'm pretty sure. But there was, in Paul's letter, you have a letter that's written to a specific church. That's a letter of instruction, a letter of encouragement, a letter sometimes of needing to be reminded of some very key and basic elements in the Christian life. And that was usually for one church in one particular location. And that might be passed around to other churches in the neighborhood, but more than likely it was just for a need that had arisen in that particular church. Take 1 Thessalonians, for example, one of Paul's first letters. Paul writes this letter to address a need that has arisen in that local church. The need is that there's a story going around that Jesus has come back and that everybody in the Thessalonian church has been left behind. And so Paul has to write a letter. It's a deal then. It's a deal today. It's still a deal. And so Paul addresses that letter to that group of believers, and he assures them of some very basic things about what it means to live by faith in Christ. The Gospel of Mark is written to a group of people who've been in hiding, to an entire community of believers, not just the church in one location, but an entire community of believers who've gone into exile, who've gone into hiding. The church in Rome, the church in Italy, actually, not just in Rome, the Christian church in all of Italy was under attack around the time of Mark's gospel being written. It was under attack by Nero, first of all. And then later on there were other Roman leaders, emperors as well. But Nero was the one that really kind of kicked off the persecution of Christians. There were a lot of reasons that happened, but one of the primary ones was that Nero needed a scapegoat. Rome had caught on fire. Rome had burned. Parts of Rome had burned to the ground. It was destroyed. It was rubble. It was a huge issue. Rome burned for half a week before they were able to get the fires under control. And there was a rumor that got started that it was Nero who lit the first torch and threw it on the fire. That it was Nero's soldiers who kept people from putting the fires out before it turned into a huge blaze that was uncontrollable. And Nero, no matter what he did in the rebuilding process of all of this, no matter what he did to make himself look better, there was still this rumor that was going on under the surface.